and slay Achilles, the murderer dire of thy brothers. Venging Hector, return, my son, to the clasp of thy mother. But in his calm august, to Paris Priam the monarch. Victor, so mightst thou come, so gladden the heart of thy mother. Then to the aged father of Paris, Helen the Argive, bright and immortal, and sad like a star that grows near to the dawning, and on its pale companions looks, who now fade from its vision. Me do pardon and love, my parents, even Helen, cause of all bane and all death. But I came from the gods for this ruin, born as a torch for the burning of empires, cursed with this beauty. Nor have I known a father's embrace, a mother's caresses, but to the distant gods I was born, and nursed as an alien here by earth, from fear, not affection, compelled by the thunders. Two are her monstrous births, from the Furies and from the Immortals. Either, touching mortality, suffers and bears not the contact. I have been both, a monster of doom and a portent of beauty. Slowly, Priam the monarch answered to Argive Helen. That which thou art, the gods have made thee, thou couldst not be other. That which thou didst, the gods have done, thou couldst not prevent them. Who here shall blame, or whom shall he pardon? Should not my people rail at me, murmuring, Priam has lost what his fathers had gathered? Cursed is this king by heaven, and cursed who are born as his subjects. Masked, the high gods act. The doer is hid by his working. Each of us bears his punishment, fruit of a seed that's forgotten. Each of us curses his neighbor, protecting his heart with illusions. Therefore, like children, we blame each other and hate and are angry. Take, my child, the joy of the sunshine won by thy beauty. I, who lodge on this earth as an alien bound by the body, wearing my sorrow even as I wear the imperial purple, praise yet the gods for my days that have seen thee at last in my ending. Fitly Troy may cease, having gazed on thy beauty, O Helen. He became silent. He ceased from words. But Paris and Helen lightly went and gladly, pursuing their footsteps, the mother once of Troilus, mother once of Hector, stood at the door with her death in her eyes, nor returned from her yearning, but as one after a vanishing sunbeam gazes in prison, gazed down the corridors after him, long who had passed from her vision. Then in the silent chamber, Cassandra, seized by Apollo, staggered erect and tossing her snow-white arms of affliction, cried to the heavens in her pain, for the fierce god tortured her bosom. Woe is me! Woe for the guile and the bitter gift of Apollo! Woe, thrice woe, for my birth in Troy, and the lineage of Teucer. So do you deal, O gods, with those who have served you and laboured, those who have borne for your sake the evil burden of greatness. Blessed is he who holds mattock in hand, or who bends o'er the furrow, taking no thought for the good of mankind, with no yearnings for knowledge. Woe unto me for my wisdom, which none shall value nor hearken. Woe unto thee, O king, for thy strength, which shall not deliver. Better the eye that is sealed, more blessed is the spirit that's feeble. Vainly your hopes with iron necessity struggle, O mortals. Virtue shall lie in her pangs, for the gods have need of her torture. Sin shall be scourged, though her deeds were compelled by the gods in their anger. None shall avail in the end. The coward shall die, and the hero. Troy shall fall in her sin, and her virtues shall not protect her. Argos shall grow by her crimes, till the gods shall destroy her forever. Now have I fruit of thy love, O Loxias, dreadful Apollo. Woe is me! Woe for the flame that approaches the house of my fathers! Woe is me! Woe for the hand of Ajax laid on my tresses! Woe, thrice woe to him who shall ravish, and him who shall cherish! Woe for the ships that shall bound too swift o'er the azure Aegean! Woe for thy splendid shambles of hell, O Argive Mycenae! Woe for the evil spouse, and the house accursed of Atreus. So, with her voice of the swan, she clanged out doom on the peoples, over the palace of Priam, and over the armed nation, marching resolved to the war in the pride of its centuries conquered, centuries slain by a single day of the anger of heaven. Dim to the thoughts like a vision of Hades, the luminous chamber grew. In his ivory chair, King Priam sat like a shadow, throned amid the ghosts of departed kings and forgotten empires. But in his valiance, careless and blithe, the Priamid hastened seeking the pillared Megaron wide, where Deiphobus armoured waited his coming forth with the warlike chiefs of the Trojans. Now as he passed by the halls of the women, the chambers that harboured daughters and wives of King Priam, and wives of his sons and their playmates, niches of joy that were peopled with murmurs and sweet-tongued laughters, troubled like trees with their birds in a morning of sun and of shadow, where in some garden of kings one walks with his heart in the sunshine. Out from her door, where she stood for him waiting, Polyxena started, seized his hand, and looked in his face, and spoke to her brother. Then, not even the brilliant strength of Paris availed him. Joyless he turned his face from her eyes of beauty and sorrow. So it is come, the hour that I feared, And thou goest, O Paris, armed with the strength of fate, to strike at my heart in the battle. For he is doomed, and thou and I a victim to Hades. This thou preferest, and neither thy father could move, nor thy mother, burning with joy in their palace, nor could thy country persuade thee. Nor dost thou care for thy sister's happiness, pierced by thy arrows. Will she remember it all, my sister Helen in Argos, passing tranquil days with her husband, bright Menelaus, holding her child on her knees? But we shall lie joyless in Hades. Paris replied, O sister Polyxena, blame me not wholly. We by the gods are ensnared, for the pitiless white Aphrodite, doing her will with us both, compels this. Helpless our hearts are, and when she drives, perforce must love, for death or for gladness. Weighed in unequal scales, she deals them to one or another. Happy who, holding his love, can go down into bottomless Hades. But to her brother replied in her anguish the daughter of Priam, Evilly deal with my days the immortals happy in heaven. Yes, I accuse the gods, and I curse them, who heed not our sorrow. This they have done with me, forcing my heart to the love of a foeman, one whose terrible hands have been stained with the blood of my brothers. This now they do. They have taken the two, whom I love beyond the heaven, brother and husband, and drive to the fight to be slain by each other. Nay, go thou forth, for thou canst not help it, nor I, nor can Helen. Since I must die as a pageant to satisfy Zeus and his daughter, since now my heart must be borne as a victim bleeding to please them, so let it be. Let me deck myself and be bright for the altar. Into her chamber she turned, with her great eyes blind, unregarding. He for a moment stood, then passed to the Megaron slowly. Dim was the light in his eyes, and clouded his glorious beauty. Meanwhile, armed in the palace of Priam, Penthesilea near her captains silent and mighty, stood. From the orient distant clouds of war, Surabdus and iron Surenus, Pharetus planned like the hills, Somarenes, Valorous, Tauron, high-crested Sumalus, Arithon, Sambus, and Artaxerxes. There, too, the princes of Phrygian Troia gathered for council, and with them Eurus came, Polydamas' son, who most dearly loved was of all the Trojan boys, by the glorious Virgin. She, from her arming, stayed to caress his curls and to chide him. Eurus, forgotten of grace, dost thou gad like a stray in the city, eager to mix with the armoured men and the chariots gliding? High on the roofs wouldst thou watch the swaying speck that is battle? Better to aim with the dart, or seek with thy kind the palestra. So wilt thou sooner be part of this greatness, rather than straining yearn from afar to the distance that veils the deeds of the mighty. But with an anxious lure in his smile on her, Eurus answered, Not that remoteness to see have I come to the palace of Priam, leaving the house of my fathers, but for the spear and the breastpiece. Hast thou not promised me long I shall fight in thy car with Achilles? Doubtful he eyed her, a lion's cub at play in his beauty, and mid the heroes who heard him, laughter arose for a moment, yet with a sympathy stirred. They remembered the days of their childhood, thought of Troy still mighty, life in its rose-touched dawning, when they had longed for the clash of the fight and the burden of armor. Glad, with pride of the lioness, watching her cub in the desert, couchant she lies with her paws before her, and joys in his gambols. Over the prey as he frisks and is careless, answered the virgin. Younger than thou in my nation have mounted the steed and the war-car, Eurus. Arm. From under my shield thou shalt gaze at the Thean, reaching my shafts for the cast from the rim of my car in the battle, handle perhaps the spear that shall smite down the Thean Achilles.